The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Windsor Castle as Sergeant Marcus Williams approached the royal stables. The familiar scent of hay and leather filled his nostrils, but something felt different today. His usual mount, a magnificent black stallion named Thunder, stood in his stall with an unusual tension in his posture. Thunder had been Marcus's partner for 3 years. Together, they had performed countless ceremonies, escorted royal processions, and maintained the dignified presence that the Queen's Guard was famous for. The horse was known throughout the regiment for his impeccable discipline and unwavering composure. Tourists would often comment on how still and majestic Thunder appeared during the changing of the guard ceremonies. But this morning was different. As Marcus approached with Thunder's ceremonial tack, the horse took several steps backward, shaking his massive head. His dark eyes seemed alert, almost agitated, which was completely out of character. Thunder's ears kept swiveling, picking up sounds that Marcus couldn't hear. "Easy there, boy," Marcus whispered, extending his hand slowly. Thunder had never behaved this way before. The horse's nostrils flared as he snorted, a sound that echoed through the stable corridor. Other horses in nearby stalls began to shift restlessly, as if sensing Thunder's unease. The stable master, an elderly man named George who had worked with royal horses for over 40 years, noticed the commotion. He shuffled over, his weathered face creased with concern. George had seen everything in his decades of service, from horses spooked by thunderstorms to those refusing to work due to illness. "Never seen Thunder act like this," George muttered, stroking his gray beard. "He's always been our most reliable mount. Something's got him rattled, but I can't figure out what." Marcus tried again to approach with the saddle, but Thunder sidestepped. Away, his hooves clattering against the stone floor. The horse's behavior was becoming more pronounced by the minute. He seemed to be listening to something in the distance, his head tilted at an angle that suggested he was picking up sounds beyond human hearing. The morning briefing had mentioned nothing unusual. The day's schedule included the regular tourist, patrols around the castle grounds, and a ceremonial presence at the main gates. It was supposed to be a routine day, the kind that Marcus and Thunder had performed hundreds of times before. Other guards began to gather, curious about the unusual scene. Thunder was something of a celebrity among the regiment. Visitors often specifically asked about the big black horse and requested photos. His sudden refusal to cooperate was unprecedented and concerning. "Maybe he's feeling sick?" suggested Corporal Davies, another mounted guard. But Thunder's eyes were bright and alert, his coat shiny with health. This wasn't illness. This was something else entirely. As Marcus continued his attempts to saddle Thunder, the horse became increasingly agitated. He began pawing at the ground with his front hooves, a behavior that typically indicated anxiety or frustration. His breathing became more rapid, and small clouds of vapor formed in the cool morning air. The stable master brought out a different saddle, thinking perhaps Thunder was reacting to something about his usual tack. But the horse's response was the same. He backed away, refusing to allow anyone near him with any equipment. "I've never seen anything like this," Marcus admitted to his fellow guards. "It's like he knows something we don't." Thunder's agitation seemed to be increasing rather than decreasing. He began to pace in his stall, his large hooves creating a rhythmic sound against the floor. His tail swished back and forth, and he occasionally let out low whinnies that seemed almost like warnings. The other horses in the stable were now clearly affected by Thunder's behavior. Several began to pace as well, and the usual calm atmosphere of the royal stables had transformed into something much more tense and uncertain. George decided to try a different approach. He brought out some of Thunder's favorite treats, fresh carrots and sugar cubes that usually never failed to calm any horse. But Thunder, while acknowledging the treats, remained focused on whatever was capturing his attention beyond the stable. "Walls! Listen," George said suddenly, holding up his hand for silence. "Do you hear that?" In the distance, very faintly, came the sound of voices. They were too far away to make out words, but there seemed to be many people, and their voices were rising and falling in what sounded like chanting or shouting. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Thunder had been sensing something that the humans had missed entirely. The horse's extraordinary hearing had picked up the approach of something significant long before any person could detect it. The sound was growing closer, and with it, Thunder's agitation continued to increase. Whatever was coming toward the castle, the horse clearly perceived it as a threat, or at least a significant disturbance to the usual order of things. As the morning progressed and the sounds became clearer, Marcus realized that Thunder's refusal to cooperate might not be stubbornness at all. It might be wisdom. By mid-morning, the distant sounds had become impossible to ignore. What had started as faint voices was now clearly identifiable as a large crowd of people moving toward the castle. Marcus and his fellow guards exchanged worried glances as they realized Thunder had been sensing this disturbance for hours before any human had noticed. Captain Reynolds, the commanding officer of the mounted guard, arrived at the stables with a grim expression. He had just received reports from the castle's security team about an approaching demonstration. Social media had been buzzing for days about planned protests, but intelligence had suggested they would remain in the designated areas far from the royal residence. "Gentlemen," Captain Reynolds announced, "we have a situation developing. A large group of protesters is moving toward the main gates. They're supposed to stay in the permitted zone, but early reports suggest they're not following the agreed route." Thunder's behavior suddenly made perfect sense. The horse had detected the approaching crowd through sound, vibration, or perhaps some other sense that humans couldn't fully understand. His refusal to be saddled wasn't stubbornness. It was an early warning system. Marcus looked at Thunder with new respect. The horse stood in his stall, still alert, but somehow calmer now that the humans were beginning to understand what he had been trying to communicate. His ears continued to swivel toward the approaching sounds, tracking the movement of the crowd with remarkable precision. "How many people are we talking about?" asked Sergeant Thompson, another experienced mounted guard. Captain Reynolds consulted his radio. "Initial estimates suggest several hundred, possibly more. They're peaceful so far, but they're definitely moving beyond their permitted boundaries. The situation is developing rapidly." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Thunder, who was supposed to be their partner in maintaining order and security, had been the first to detect the very situation they might need to respond to. Yet he was refusing to participate in what could become a significant security challenge. George, the stable master, approached Thunder's stall with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said slowly, "horses have been used in crowd control for centuries, but they've also been hurt in riots and protests. Maybe Thunder is smarter than we. Give him credit for." The sound of the approaching crowd was now clearly audible throughout the castle grounds. Voices rose and fell in organized chants, and the rhythmic sound of hundreds of footsteps could be heard on the pavement outside the castle walls. Thunder's head remained high, his attention focused entirely on these sounds. Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "Maybe we should listen to Thunder today," he said quietly. "If he doesn't want to go out there, maybe there's a good reason." Captain Reynolds looked skeptical. "Sergeant Williams, we have our duties to perform. The royal family's security depends on our presence and visibility." But even as he spoke, more reports were coming in over the radio. The crowd was larger than initially estimated, and their mood seemed to be shifting. What had started as an organized, peaceful demonstration was becoming something more unpredictable. Thunder seemed to sense the changing dynamics even from his position in the stable. His behavior shifted from alert attention to something approaching anxiety. He began to pace again, his large body moving restlessly within the confines of his stall. Other horses in the stable were now clearly affected as well. The usual calm environment had been replaced by an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty. Several horses were pawing at the ground, and their whinnies had taken on a different tone than usual. "Sir," came a voice over Captain Reynolds's radio, "the crowd has reached the outer perimeter. They're not violent, but they're definitely not staying in the designated protest area. We need to consider our response options." Marcus stood beside Thunder's stall, watching his partner's reactions. The horse's behavior was providing a real-time assessment of the situation outside. Every change in Thunder's demeanor seemed to correspond with developments in the crowd's movement and mood. "Look at him," Marcus said to the other guards. "He's not just refusing to work, he's actively monitoring the situation. It's like he's gathering intelligence." The stablemaster nodded in agreement. "Horses have been used in warfare and peacekeeping for thousands of years. They learn to read crowds, to sense danger before humans do. Thunder might be trying to protect not just himself, but all of us." As if to emphasize the point, Thunder suddenly became very still. His ears pointed forward with intense concentration. Seconds later, the radio crackled with an urgent update. "The crowd has reached the main gates. Repeat, protesters are at the main gates." Thunder had detected their arrival before the human security team had reported it. His sensory abilities were providing information that was proving invaluable to understanding the developing situation. Captain Reynolds looked around, at his men, then at Thunder, who remained alert and focused despite his refusal to be saddled. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we need to reconsider our approach to this situation." The sound of the crowd was now loud enough that every person in the stable could hear individual voices and specific chants. Thunder's ears twitched at particular sounds, as if he was distinguishing between different types of calls and responses from the protesters. Marcus placed his hand on Thunder's neck, feeling the tension in the horse's muscles. "What do you think, boy?" he whispered. "What are you trying to tell us?" Thunder turned his head slightly toward Marcus, his dark eyes seeming to convey a message that went beyond simple animal instinct. The horse had become an unexpected advisor, in a situation that was rapidly evolving beyond anyone's initial expectations. The situation outside the castle walls was deteriorating rapidly. What had begun as a peaceful demonstration was transforming into something far more chaotic and unpredictable. The radio chatter had become almost constant, with security teams reporting new developments every few minutes. Thunder's behavior had evolved as well. The horse was no longer simply agitated. He appeared to be actively analyzing the sounds and vibrations coming from beyond the stable walls. His head moved in small, precise movements, tracking different groups within the crowd, as if he could distinguish between various factions among the protesters. "Sir, we have a problem," came an urgent voice over Captain Reynolds's radio. "The crowd has split into multiple groups. Some are trying to push toward the secondary gates, and others are attempting to scale the outer walls. We need mounted units for crowd dispersal." Captain Reynolds looked around the stable. 3 other horses stood ready, already saddled and prepared for duty. Their riders were experienced guards who had handled difficult situations before. But Thunder, their most reliable and imposing mount, remained steadfastly uncooperative. Marcus made another attempt to approach Thunder with the saddle, but the horse's response was immediate and definitive. Thunder reared slightly, not aggressively, but clearly communicating his absolute refusal to participate in whatever was happening outside. "It's like he knows something terrible is about to happen," observed Corporal Davies. "Look at how he's positioning himself. He's trying to stay as far from the stable doors as possible." The stablemaster, George, had been quietly observing Thunder's behavior throughout the morning. Now he spoke up with the authority of his decades of experience. "In my 40 years with these horses, I've seen them predict storms, earthquakes, and even fires before humans detected any danger. Thunder isn't just being difficult, he's warning us." As if summoned by their conversation, a new development crackled over the radio. "Multiple fights have broken out near the main gates. The situation is becoming violent. We need all available units immediately." Thunder's reaction was immediate and dramatic. The horse began to pace more rapidly, his breathing became labored, and he issued a series of low whinnies that sounded almost like warnings. The other horses in the stable responded to Thunder's distress, becoming increasingly agitated themselves. "Something's wrong," Marcus said, his voice tight with concern. "Thunder has never acted like this, even during the most stressful ceremonies or when there were large crowds for royal weddings." Captain Reynolds was faced with a difficult decision. Protocol demanded that all mounted units respond to crowd control situations, but his most experienced horse was refusing to cooperate. More importantly, that horse seemed to possess information about the developing situation that human intelligence was missing. "Sir," came another radio update, "we have reports of potential security threats within the crowd. Intelligence suggests some individuals may have weapons or other dangerous items. The situation is no longer considered a simple protest." Thunder's behavior became even more pronounced. The horse was now clearly distressed, not just alert. He began to sweat despite the cool morning air, and his movements became more erratic. It was as if he could sense danger that went far beyond what the humans understood. Marcus made a decision that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. "Captain, I request permission to remain with Thunder and monitor the situation from here. Something tells me we're going to need his insights more than his physical presence out there." The other mounted guards looked at Marcus in surprise. He was known for his dedication to duty and had never requested to avoid an assignment. But Thunder's unprecedented behavior was affecting everyone's judgment about the proper course of action. "The crowd has breached the outer perimeter," came an increasingly urgent radio transmission. "Repeat, we have unauthorized individuals on castle grounds. All units respond immediately." Thunder's reaction to this news was unlike anything anyone in the stable had ever witnessed. The horse became almost frantic, pacing in tight circles within his stall, his eyes wide with what could only be described as fear. But it wasn't fear for himself. It seemed to be fear for the humans around him. "He's trying to protect us," George said with sudden understanding. "Thunder knows something about this crowd that we don't. He's not refusing to work. He's refusing to let us walk into danger." Captain Reynolds paused in his preparations, looking at Thunder with new consideration. The horse's behavior was so extreme and so contrary to his usual character that it demanded attention. In all his years of service, Reynolds had learned to trust the instincts of both his men and his animals. "Sir, we have multiple security breaches," came another radio update. "The crowd is no longer responding to standard crowd control measures. We may need to consider evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel." Thunder's agitation reached a new peak. He was now calling out repeatedly, his whinnies echoing through the stable complex. The sound was clearly audible outside, and Marcus realized that Thunder was trying to communicate not just with the humans in the stable, but with something or someone beyond the walls. The other horses had become so affected by Thunder's behavior that they were also becoming difficult to manage. It was as if Thunder's fear and concern were contagious, spreading throughout the entire stable complex. Marcus stood beside Thunder's stall, no longer attempting to saddle the horse. Instead, he found himself studying Thunder's reactions, trying to understand what the animal was detecting that human senses couldn't perceive. "Captain," Marcus said quietly, "I think Thunder is trying to save our lives." As if to confirm his words, the radio erupted with urgent chatter about the discovery of suspicious packages among the crowd and the possibility that the protest had been infiltrated by individuals with far more dangerous intentions than peaceful demonstration. The castle grounds erupted into chaos as security teams scrambled to respond to multiple simultaneous threats. What had started as a peaceful protest had transformed into a complex security crisis that was testing every system and protocol the Royal Protection Services had in place. Thunder's behavior had reached a level of intensity that bordered on panic. The usually composed and dignified horse was now calling out almost continuously, his whinnies carrying across the courtyard and adding to the cacophony of shouting voices, radio chatter, and running footsteps that filled the air. all mounted. "Units to positions immediately," came the urgent command over Captain Reynolds's radio. "We have confirmed security threats and need crowd dispersal capabilities now." But as the other guards led their horses from the stable, Thunder planted his feet and refused to move. Marcus had given up any attempt to saddle him and was instead focused on trying to understand what the horse was so desperately trying to communicate. "He's not just afraid," Marcus realized aloud. "Look at his eyes. He's trying to tell us something specific." Thunder's gaze kept shifting between the stable doors and the humans around him. His behavior had become so frantic that George, the stable master, made an unprecedented decision to evacuate the other horses to a more secure location deeper within the castle complex. "In 40 years, I've never seen anything like this," George muttered as he led the other animals away. "Thunder knows something we don't, and whatever it is, it's big." Captain Reynolds was torn between duty and instinct. Every protocol demanded that all available resources be deployed to handle the crisis outside. But Thunder's extraordinary behavior was impossible to ignore. The horse had never been wrong about potential dangers in the past. "Sir, we have multiple breaches of the secure perimeter," came another radio update. "Some individuals in the crowd appear to be specifically targeting access points to the stable complex and other support buildings." Thunder's reaction to this news was immediate and dramatic. He reared up on his hind legs, a behavior he had never displayed before, then began pawing at the ground with such force that sparks flew from his horseshoes against the stone floor. "They're coming for the stables," Marcus said with sudden clarity. "That's what Thunder has been trying to tell us. This isn't just a protest. Someone is specifically targeting this area." The realization hit everyone in the stable at the same time. Thunder's refusal to leave his stall, his intense focus on sounds coming from specific directions, his apparent fear for the humans around him. It all made sense if the stable complex itself was a target. Captain Reynolds immediately radioed the information to the Central Command. "This is Captain Reynolds. We have reason to believe the stable complex may be a specific target. Request immediate security assessment of this area." Thunder seemed to calm slightly when he heard the radio transmission, as if he understood that his message was finally being received and acted upon. But his alertness remained at maximum levels, his ears continuing to track sounds and movements beyond the stable walls. "Captain, we're detecting movement toward your location," came the immediate response. "Multiple individuals have separated from the main crowd and are approaching the stable complex from 3 different directions." The confirmation of Thunder's warnings sent a chill through everyone present. The horse had somehow detected the approach of these individuals long before human security systems had identified the threat. Marcus found himself looking at Thunder with a mixture of amazement and gratitude. "You've been trying to protect us all along, haven't you, boy?" Thunder turned his head toward Marcus, and for a moment, their eyes met in what seemed like a moment of perfect understanding. The horse had indeed been trying to protect not just himself, but everyone in the stable complex. "Sir, we have visual confirmation of unauthorized individuals attempting to breach the stable perimeter," came an urgent radio update. "They appear to be carrying equipment of some kind." Thunder's response was to move to the back of his stall and position himself between the stable doors and the humans present. His body language had shifted from panic to protective determination. He was no longer trying to flee. He was preparing to defend. The sound of running footsteps could now be heard outside the stable doors, along with voices speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Whatever was happening was no longer distant. It was immediate and present. Captain Reynolds drew his weapon and positioned himself near the stable entrance, while Marcus stayed close to Thunder, somehow understanding that the horse's extraordinary senses might continue to provide crucial information about the developing situation. "They're trying to get in," Marcus whispered, watching Thunder's ears swivel to track the movement of multiple individuals outside. Thunder can hear exactly where they are and what they're doing. The stable doors rattled as someone tested them from the outside. Thunder's reaction was to issue a low, warning whinny that seemed calculated to alert the humans to the immediate proximity of the threat. "Sir, this is Central Command. We have teams moving to your location, but you may need to hold your position for several more minutes." Several more minutes felt like an eternity as the sounds outside the stable became more urgent and determined. Thunder continued to position himself protectively, his massive body serving as both an early warning system and a potential barrier between the threats outside and the humans inside. Marcus realized that Thunder's refusal to cooperate that morning had likely saved multiple lives. If they had all been outside performing their usual duties, they would have been exposed and vulnerable when the real attack began. "Thank you," Marcus whispered to Thunder, understanding that the horse's wisdom and instincts had proven far superior to human intelligence and planning. The sound of organized footsteps approaching the stable complex grew louder and more coordinated. These weren't the chaotic movements of protesters. They were the precise, measured steps of a security response team. Thunder's ears pricked forward, and his defensive posture began to relax slightly. "This is Alpha Team approaching the stable complex," came a welcome voice over Captain Reynolds' radio. "We have multiple suspects in custody and are securing the perimeter." Thunder's reaction was immediate and telling. The tension that had held his body rigid for hours began to ease, and his breathing became less labored. Somehow, he could distinguish between the sounds of threat and the sounds of safety with remarkable precision. Marcus watched in amazement as Thunder's behavior continued to provide real-time intelligence about the situation outside. As the security teams secured the area, Thunder's agitation decreased proportionally, like a living barometer of danger levels. "Captain Reynolds, this is Central Command," came another radio transmission. "We need you to know that the individuals who targeted your location were carrying equipment designed to harm both personnel and animals. Your decision to maintain position likely prevented significant casualties." The full implications of Thunder's warnings began to sink in. The horse hadn't just detected the approach of unauthorized individuals, he had somehow sensed their malicious intent and the specific danger they posed to everyone in the stable complex. George, the stable master, returned with the other horses. He had evacuated earlier. His weathered face showed a mixture of relief and profound respect as he looked at Thunder. "That horse saved lives today," he said simply. "There's no other way to put it." Thunder seemed to understand that the immediate danger had passed. He moved toward the front of his stall for the first time since early morning, his head held high, but no longer with the desperate alertness that had characterized his behavior throughout the crisis. "Sir, we have a full report on the individuals who were attempting to breach your facility," came an update over the radio. They were part of a coordinated plan to target multiple locations within the castle complex. The stable attack was designed to create maximum chaos and potentially harm both personnel and the royal horses. Marcus felt a chill as he realized how close they had come to disaster. If Thunder hadn't refused to cooperate, if they had all been outside performing their normal duties, the consequences could have been catastrophic. Captain Reynolds approached Thunder's stall with a new level of respect. "Sergeant Williams, I owe you and Thunder an apology. Your instinct to trust your horse's judgment was exactly the right call." Thunder allowed Captain Reynolds to approach and even accepted a gentle pat on his neck, the first physical contact he had permitted from anyone other than Marcus throughout the entire ordeal. "The question is," Captain Reynolds continued, "how did Thunder know? How did he detect not just the presence of threats, but their specific intent to target this location?" George had been pondering the same question. "Horses have senses we don't fully understand," he explained. "They can detect changes in air pressure, pick up sounds at frequencies humans can't hear, and sense vibrations through the ground. But more than that, they can read human emotions and intentions in ways that still mystify scientists." Thunder seemed to be listening to the conversation, his intelligent eyes moving between the speakers as if he understood the discussion about his remarkable abilities. "There's something else," Marcus added thoughtfully. "Thunder didn't just detect danger. He actively tried to protect us. He positioned himself between us and the threats, and he refused to let us leave the safety of the stable. That's not just instinct, that's intelligence and care." As the afternoon wore on and the all clear was given for the castle complex, Thunder's behavior returned gradually to normal, but there was something different about him now, a sense of pride and accomplishment that hadn't been there before. The other guards who had responded to the crisis began returning to the stable complex, their faces showing exhaustion and stress from the day's events. When they saw Thunder calmly standing in his stall, several of them approached to offer their own thanks. "We heard what happened," said Sergeant Thompson. "Thunder's warning probably saved all our lives. We were about to ride directly into an ambush. Thunder accepted the attention and gratitude with characteristic dignity, but Marcus could see a new confidence in the horse's bearing. Thunder had proven himself not just as a ceremonial mount, but as a true guardian and protector. "Sir," Marcus said to Captain Reynolds, "I'd like to recommend Thunder for official recognition. What he did today went far beyond normal duty." Captain Reynolds nodded approvingly. "I was thinking the same thing. Thunder has earned a place in the official records of castle security. His actions today will be studied and remembered." As evening approached and the stable complex returned to its normal, quiet atmosphere, Marcus spent extra time with Thunder, brushing his coat and offering his favorite treats. The horse seemed to understand that he was being honored for his actions. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Marcus said softly. "You knew something was wrong, and you did everything you could to keep us safe." Thunder nuzzled Marcus's shoulder gently, a gesture of affection and understanding that seemed to confirm the bond that had been strengthened by the day's extraordinary events. 3 weeks had passed since the incident that would forever change how the Royal Guard viewed the intelligence and capabilities of their mounted partners. Thunder had returned to his normal duties, but his status within the regiment had been permanently elevated from ceremonial mount to recognized security asset. The official investigation into the protest and subsequent security breach had revealed the full scope of what Thunder had detected that morning. The coordinated attack had been planned for months, with specific intelligence gathered about guard rotations, animal locations, and facility vulnerabilities. Thunder's refusal to cooperate had disrupted the entire operation. Marcus stood in the stable, watching Thunder prepare for the morning ceremony with his usual dignity and composure. But there was something different about their relationship now, a deeper level of trust and communication that hadn't existed before the crisis. "You know," said George, the stable master, as he approached with Thunder's ceremonial tack, "I've been thinking about what happened that day. Thunder didn't just save lives, he taught us something important about listening to our animals." The story of Thunder's heroic actions had spread throughout the castle and beyond. News media had picked up the story, though the full security details remained classified. Thunder had become something of a celebrity, with visitors specifically asking to see the horse that saved the day. But the most significant changes were happening within the Royal Guard itself. New protocols had been established that required guards to pay closer attention to their horses' behavior, especially in situations where the animals showed unusual stress or alertness. Captain Reynolds had submitted a detailed report that recommended Thunder for the PDSA Dickin Medal, often called the Victoria Cross for Animals. The medal was awarded to animals that had shown exceptional bravery in military or civil defense situations. "Sergeant Williams," Captain Reynolds said as he arrived at the stable for the morning briefing, "I have news about Thunder's commendation. The review board has approved the recommendation. Thunder will be receiving official recognition for his actions." Marcus felt a surge of pride as he looked at Thunder. The horse seemed to sense the positive attention, standing even more proudly than usual as his tack was fitted. The investigation had also revealed that Thunder's extraordinary behavior that day wasn't entirely unique. Historical records showed numerous instances of military and police horses detecting threats before their human partners. But Thunder's case was notable for the specificity and persistence of his warnings. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an animal behavior specialist who had been brought in to study Thunder's actions, had spent considerable time observing him. Her preliminary findings suggested that Thunder had somehow detected not just the presence of threats, but their emotional state and intentions. Horses are incredibly sensitive to human emotions and stress hormones, Dr. Mitchell explained to the assembled guards. Thunder likely detected the heightened aggression and adrenaline of the individuals planning the attack long before they came close enough for human senses to perceive the danger. Thunder seemed to enjoy the attention and study, cooperating fully with Dr. Mitchell's observations while maintaining his usual professional demeanor during official duties. The bond between Marcus and Thunder had deepened significantly since the incident. Marcus found himself paying much closer attention to Thunder's subtle behavioral cues, treating the horse more as a partner than simply a mount. "It's changed how I think about all our animals," Marcus explained to a group of new recruits who had come to hear about the incident. "They're not just transportation or ceremony. They're intelligent partners who can contribute to our mission in ways we're still learning to understand." Thunder's daily routine had expanded to include informal security assessments. Guards began consulting him before entering areas where they felt uncertain, watching his reactions for signs of potential problems. The horse seemed to understand his new role and responsibilities. His alertness during patrols had increased, and he showed a new level of engagement with his surroundings that went beyond his previous ceremonial focus. Other horses in the stable complex had also benefited from the increased attention to animal behavior. Several had shown subtle signs of stress or alertness that were now being investigated rather than dismissed, leading to the discovery of minor security concerns and facility maintenance issues. Thunder's story had become part of the official training curriculum for new Royal Guards. Every recruit now learned about the importance of animal-human partnerships and the value of paying attention to their mount's behavioral warnings. The most important lesson, Captain Reynolds would tell each new class, is that Thunder didn't just refuse to cooperate. He actively tried to protect his human partners. That's the kind of loyalty and intelligence we should recognize and honor. As Marcus finished Thunder's morning preparations, he reflected on how much had changed since that terrifying day. Thunder had proven that the partnership between guards and their horses was more profound and valuable than anyone had previously understood. Thunder stepped forward eagerly as Marcus opened the stall door, ready for another day of service. But now both horse and rider knew they were part of something larger than ceremony. They were guardians working together to protect something precious and important. The morning sun cast the same long shadows across the courtyard as it had on that fateful day weeks earlier. But now those shadows held no fear or uncertainty. Thunder moved through them with confidence, his head held high, ready to face whatever challenges the day might bring, knowing that his warnings would be heard, and his wisdom would be respected.